The Doctor Who franchise is probably older than my parents, and when a character manages to retain its relevance even to the Gen Z kids, you know it's always going to be gold. The Doctor has fought an endless list of villains over the years, and most of these characters were so limited that it almost felt like wasted potential. With a reboot of the Whoniverse, many big-hitter villains and extraterrestrial entities have the chance for a do-over. With a Christmas special and the recently premiered episodes, many such characters had been introduced to perfectly fit the modern audiences. They're all quirky, stylish, and equally scary to a point that it feels like with Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor Who, we have ventured into a whole new side of the Whoniverse brimming with untapped potential. So without wasting another second, let's discuss every extraterrestrial entity and monster that the latest rendition of Doctor Who has come across. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. The Goblins and the Goblin King. So, the Doctor Who Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road, had introduced us to a quirky group of troublemakers. This special had wrapped up Doctor Who's 60th anniversary celebrations and was the milestone for its latest relaunch, with Ncuti Gatwa taking the reign of the 15th Doctor. This episode was also an origin plot for Ruby Sunday, the Doctor's new human sidekick. The Goblins bring a fresh twist to Doctor Who's roster, with Russell T. Davies back as the showrunner. The show is leaning more towards fantasy-ridden threats, so it was only fair to introduce goblins as the key villain in the first look of the new Doctor to give us a perfect mix of all the new Doctor Who's classic elements with the supernatural. In Western folklore, goblins are known as mischievous and malevolent beings that often cause trouble for individuals or households. Doctor Who's portrayal of goblins aligns with these traditions, as the Doctor describes them as carnivorous creatures who thrive on coincidence and mishaps. Basically, they are depicted as the gremlins behind all the malfunctioning machines and the soul manipulators who ensure all the ongoing misfortunes in people's lives. Interestingly though, these goblins prefer near misses over fatal outcomes, as the tension and suspense from a near miss generate more power for them. However, when they get bored of toying with their victims, the goblins simply kill their victims. From what I understood, the goblins have a long history on Earth and are probably responsible for every accident throughout time. This line connects the goblins with a classic Doctor Who theme which dictates how the most memorable villains often stem from ordinary experiences. After all, who hasn't had a close call, a stroke of luck, or a streak of misfortune? According to the Doctor, these are moments when goblins focus their attention on humans, gaining sustenance from such events. Apparently, the goblins harness the energy of coincidence, which allows them to manipulate the time stream. So it was their sensitivity to time which allowed them to detect the coincidental patterns shaping Ruby's life. These goblins had simply attached themselves to her, exacerbating a run of bad luck. But later on, the goblins exploit the potency of coincidence to travel back in time, attempting to eliminate Ruby as an infant. And this action inevitably alters the present, leaving the Doctor in a reality where Ruby no longer exists. The Doctor doesn't view the goblins as genuine time travelers, which might be seen as a bit of snobbery on his part. However, the Doctor's stance likely stems from the goblins' limited time travel capabilities. He describes them more as surfers riding the waves of time around their targets. In this instance, their abilities are likely amplified by the immense coincidences surrounding the Doctor and Ruby, granting them significant power. So normally they wouldn't be able to achieve the feats seen in The Church on Ruby Road. Plus, there was another layer to the goblin's nature. When the Doctor destroys the goblin ship, it doesn't just cease to exist, but seems to have never been there in the first place. Similarly, when the goblins alter history, Ruby doesn't completely vanish. Instead, elements from the main timeline, including the Doctor, disappear for her, as if she's been shifted into a different reality. This hints that the goblins might not be entirely aligned with reality or the normal flow of time. It would also explain their sensitivity, their unique abilities, and even their flying ship. So in short, the goblins are masters of chance and luck, surfing the time waves to target unlucky babies surrounded by unfortunate coincidences, which they find particularly appetizing. And these goblins are mere foot soldiers because they have a big fat baby-eating king in their gravity-defying skyship. The Goblin King simply couldn't resist the coincidence of Ruby Sunday and baby Lulu Bell sharing a Christmas Eve birthday, so the goblins set their trap by orchestrating a series of accidents and strokes of bad luck in Ruby's life to get to Lulu Bell. Although Lulu Bell was saved, the goblins did go back in time to fetch Ruby as an infant, but before they can get her to their king, the Doctor intercepted her ship and sent it crashing onto a church spire, thus putting an end to the Goblin King's reign and preventing their feast from happening. The space babies. I think only Russell T. Davies can come with a concept as bizarre as space babies. Some might think it's the Disneyfication of Doctor Who, but in reality, Davies wanted to begin the show on a lighter note in order to allow the Doctor to explain the basics to the newcomers by using a pretty straightforward storyline. So after recruiting Ruby as his sidekick, the Doctor tries to show off what TARDIS can do and asks Ruby to just pick a number, any number. Of course, she picks 5 random numbers that throws them straight into the future in a far abandoned space station. Most of the first episode unfolds in the year 21506, aboard a closed space station orbiting a human colony planet. Once they reach the upper level of this space station, things start getting super weird as they find out that the station is essentially a baby-making farm and is actually being run by space babies, as the Doctor mentions 1,000 times throughout the episode. Also, these are not your typical gurgling infants because these babies can talk and seem to be running the show solo while zooming around in their motorized strollers. Apparently, the adult crew left because of a government shutdown caused by a financial downturn, but ironically, it was against the law to shut down the baby-making machine, and as Ruby points out, it's a not-so-subtle hint about how the planet doesn't stop babies from being born, but doesn't care for them once they arrive. Pretty clear message there, given that she was similarly abandoned outside a church. Anyways, all this information is actually given to them by Jocelyn, the only adult who plays nanny for this army of unsupervised babies through the system's AI Nan-E intercom. She tells Ruby and Doctor Who that since the station is stuck, there is no chance of them reaching the closest planet that helps refugees. But what's more concerning is that the station is facing an environmental crisis, while supplies and oxygen are starting to run out given that they've been stuck inside for 6 years. And you know what's worse? These babies are sentient, which means that even if they are 6 years old, they look like they've just popped out of the oven. They even mistake Ruby and the Doctor for their own parents who had finally come back for them, and although the duo clears the confusion up, we find out these babies have never been hugged or picked up. Anyways, by the end of the episode, the Doctor helps the babies out by clearing up the space station vents. He figures out that the smell and the pressure issue of the lower level is actually coming from all the dirty diapers clogging up the vent, thus preventing it from moving. So he makes the constipated space station fart itself right out of the orbit. I'm pretty sure that fart was lethal, given that it's 6 years worth of poop clogging the vents. Apparently, the sheer force of this poo cloud compensated for the station's lack of an engine, allowing Jocelyn and the space babies to show up at the nearest colony for help and begin a new civilization in Babyland. The Boogeyman. If you think the concept of space babies running a baby farm in a closed space station in the year 21506 is wild, wait till you find out how the Boogeyman came into existence. The Doctor and Ruby first met the terrifyingly nasty, spiky-toothed, long-clawed alien-like creature called Boogeyman at the lower level of the space station. This monster lurks in the pipes of the station and is basically a living nightmare for the space babies who collectively cry in panic and fear. In the following events, an oversmart space baby named Eric goes down to fight the Boogeyman because Ruby called it a hoax. Luckily, the Doctor and Ruby manages to save him, while the other space babies use the flamethrower to ward off the monsters. Soon, Ruby begins to notice how their whole situation feels like a children's tale coming to life, complete with a nanny, babies, and a Boogeyman. Soon, the duo figures out how, interestingly, the station's malfunctioning educational software decided that, like in a classic bedtime story, the babies needed a scary monster to fear, so it created one that screams at a terrifying pitch and gives the babies the perfect childhood monster needed to inspire their fear. This explains why even the Doctor, who is typically fearless, was weary of the Boogeyman, given it was specifically designed to invoke terror in a way that the Boogeyman is like the station's own baby, solely made from a part of the space babies to keep them in check. This is also why the Doctor did not let the humongous slimy-skinned monster die, even though if given the opportunity, the Boogeyman will probably chow him down with its enormous gaping mouth filled with multiple rows of incredibly long, razor-sharp teeth. Irrespective of that, the Doctor is compassionate for the monster after realizing that just like him, the Boogeyman is the last of its kind, thus prompting him to rescue it from being ejected into space. Later, even the babies realize the significance of the Boogeyman and celebrate its return, understanding their own need for it. The Maestro. I was surprised how wildly different The Devil's Chord was from Space Babies to a point that they almost feel like two different shows. Doctor Who went from a monster made of baby boogers to a godlike entity from another dimension with the ability to turn music into a powerful weapon of destruction. The Maestro is an original villain, and their power is just as unconventional as it is horrifying. This time-traveling being is unleashed into the world through a lost chord found by the musical prodigy Timothy Drake. After crawling out from a piano, Maestro makes all the muscles in their face work, switching between cackles, pouts, snarls, and shouts. Soon after their antiques, Maestro simply gobbles down Timothy's compositions with immense satisfaction, which marks the beginning of their quest to consume all music of the world until only sounds that remain are lame Aeolian tones of nuclear fallout. Later, when the Doctor and Ruby arrived in London in 1965, they discovered that all the music of the world had been stolen, wiping out the talents of iconic artists like the Beatles and Cilla Black, along with countless others on the planet. Somehow, all of them seem to be singing extremely weird lyrics that literally sound like an AI's generated verse. To figure out what is really happening and why the world is so hell-bent on dismissing music by calling it useless, the Doctor watches as Ruby plays the piano on a rooftop, causing a few curious onlookers to peer out from their windows to listen. However, when Maestro crawls out of the piano and giggles the same tune that was once used by the toy maker to manipulate humanity, the Doctor immediately understands who he is being pitted against. The Doctor is evidently overwhelmed and simply grabbed Ruby to run for their lives, which I believe is a sensible reaction considering Maestro's godlike powers. After all, Maestro can manipulate the TARDIS through their sound waves while traversing through space and time independently. As you must have figured out, Maestro is a flamboyant character marked by their vibrant, rotating outfits, striking orange hair, and extravagant style. This attention-grabbing villain exudes theatricality and flair while possessing a remarkable talent for singing and playing musical instruments. So how on earth can the Doctor possibly outwit or overpower a being that embodies the essence of music itself? It all comes down to the final battle at the end of the episode as the Doctor and Maestro engage in a musical showdown. Weirdly enough, Maestro's violin breaks down while trying to match the Doctor's intensity, but they aren't necessarily worried because the Doctor simply does not have the musical skill to find the right chord. Well, emotions drive music, and the Doctor has felt it all. As he begins to hit the right notes, Maestro starts to weaken. Sadly, he screws up the 7th note, allowing Maestro to regain their strength and trap Ruby and the Doctor in two different musical instruments. Lucky for them, in the end, Paul McCartney and John Lennon stumble upon the piano and play the correct final note, ultimately freeing the duo from their trapped instruments and banishing Maestro for good. So these are the new eccentric extraterrestrial entities seen in the latest rendition of Doctor Who yet. Have you guys managed to watch the latest premiere episodes of the show? Let us know about your verdict on 15 in the comment box below. As always, if you like our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.